And to answer your questions today, I'm joined by Dr Elisabetta Groppelli, a virologist and lecturer in global health at St George's University of London, and Dr Bharat Panchania, expert in communicable disease control and outbreak at the University of Exeter Medical School. Welcome back to you both. Quite a momentous week, I suspect. Elisabetta, and that is what a lot of people want to talk about. Barbara Lynch from Lincoln. Will people who've had the virus still need the vaccine? Does the vaccine behave the same way if there are antibodies already?
Right, a really fantastic question. And the answer is that at the moment, we cannot assume that people who've had infection actually are protected from further infection. And this is the reason, for example, if you've had a positive test for COVID back in March and you're showing symptoms right now, you still have to self-isolate. So this would support the fact that actually anybody who can get the vaccine should actually get the vaccine, regardless of what they had, if they had COVID or not. However, this is where I need to use the words more data is needed, because the reality is that vaccine trials have volunteers have selected volunteers specifically because they haven't had a history of COVID. So at the moment, the data is either with the pharmaceutical company Pfizer and will be shared, or simply is something that we need to wait for so we can make a safe and informed decision.
All that said, Dr Panchania, when you heard about this vaccine along with the rest of us, what was your reaction?
Well, it's always good news, but my first reaction is show me the data and tell me that it works really well in the vulnerable groups, because the people that I want to immunize are the people in the vulnerable groups and protect them properly. So I'm really keen to see the data for the vulnerable groups.
OK, Elisabetta, I saw you nodding at that one. And we've got this question from Tanya and Bromley. It says, is there any indication of how long the immunity from the vaccine may be?
Again, this is about the need for data, and so we are going, and we are very excited with cautious optimism about a press release. We haven't seen the data. What we can say, however, is that the trial for the vaccine generated by Pfizer started back in July. So there is at least some data about 3-4 months of actually the immunity lasting. If it lasts longer, only time will tell. And this is also why not normally a vaccine development takes a long time, but also why vaccine volunteers have actually been roped in for 12 or 18 months, because it's specifically so they can be monitored and assessed for how long the immune system will respond or will have immunity to the coronavirus for that specific reason. So more data if it's there already, or more data that is going to come.
OK, now a lot of people still sending questions all along the same sort of lines. And Bharat, if I may call you Bharat, I've got this question from Gordon King in Gloucester. I'm getting a lot of tweets along the same line, which is, having remembered the thalidomide drug, can it be assumed that the long-term effects will not be found out in the future? There are worries about any vaccine on that basis when it's rushed through like this.
Well, the first thing I want to do is reassure our viewers that whilst we've got the vaccine in record time, it doesn't mean it has been rushed through. It's just that a lot of money, an unlimited amount of money was made available to speed up the phase 1, 2, 3 trials. Furthermore, and this is really important, we should actively monitor the people who have been immunized. In other words, we have it on their record that they received the vaccine, and then we follow them up. And also, we take a representative sample of people who have been immunized and ask them pertinent questions to make sure that we haven't got unknown side effects from these vaccines. And this is, by the way, what we do normally in any case. But as this is so new, we should also do this.
And picking up on that is Philip in Exeter. And Elisabetta, he asks, is there a risk of the Pfizer vaccine eliciting a long COVID response in a subset of recipients? We should say, at the moment, people still don't understand long COVID itself.
Absolutely. So long COVID is intended as the persistence of symptoms for weeks or maybe even months after the acute infection. And as you say, although we don't know much about long COVID, it seems to be very much linked to a proper infection. So the virus infecting a human being and then the human being having a response, and how this interplay actually can be detrimental on a long term to the human host. It has to be said that many of the vaccines vaccines that are currently on trial, and certainly the Pfizer vaccines, actually do not cause an infection. They cannot cause an infection because they are only carrying a small bit of the viral RNA, so of the genome of the RNA. So the potential for infection and therefore for long COVID is simply not there. Having said that, as Professor Barrett has said, it's absolutely crucial to monitor the recipients of the vaccine for the longer term, because it might be that there are some side effects that become apparent only in the longer term. And so this is again cautious optimism, but certainly being vigilant and doing things properly, as with all the other vaccines that have been developed so far.
And Elisabetta, I'll stay with you because Robert Rolker in Colchester says, how will the vaccine be effective if the virus mutates multiple times?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Viruses tend to do that. The coronaviruses don't necessarily do that as well. But yes, the part of the virus that is called the spike protein that is targeted by the front runners vaccines is actually it's a little bit different. So there are some variants that we call, simply because the building blocks of the spike protein are a little bit different. So the majority of this protein will be stable enough to be recognized by the antibodies, but some bits will change. The most important thing is to continue monitoring, understanding, keep reading the genome of the viruses that are actually out there and infecting people, so we can do a monitoring and matching, so making sure that the vaccines actually match the circulating strains. And again, this is not completely new at all. We need to do that with all the viruses, all the vaccines, and this is specifically behind the seasonal flu vaccines, because this monitoring and matching needs to be done for the circulating strains of flu. I'll just say that the most important thing is that this matching and monitoring is about tailoring, is about fine-tuning the vaccines. It doesn't mean that we need to go back to square one. So it means more jabs, it means more work, but this is what viruses require, and we just have to deal with it.
Dr. Pancagna, I can see you nodding away. It's always good to know that two experts are always in agreement. It does strengthen this whole process. I've got this from Brian Callahan for you, in fact. Are there any medical conditions, he says, such as a weakened immune system, that will prevent the vaccine being given?
No, the good news is that this is not for example, a live attenuated vaccine. In other words, we are not giving any live products. What we are giving, if we are to use the mRNA, Pfizer or Oxford one, they're both similar platforms, is a instruction to our cells to make the protein to which we make immunity against. Therefore, I do not visualize a group of people who are excluded from receiving this vaccine. So that's very good news.
OK, I just want to ask you both, totally on a personal level, because, we've all got to know each other over the last few months. For Dr. Pancagna, first of all, when you heard that news of a vaccine which, as far as they were concerned, was 90% effective, what was your reaction to that?
I always take a deep breath and say, I don't believe all of it, because, as I said earlier, show me the vulnerable groups, because with the vulnerable groups, I bet you the efficacy is less than 90%.
Elisabetta, what about you?
Yes, my first reaction was what I described a cautious smile. Smile because it looked like good news, but cautious. Cautious because, yes, as Professor Barrett has said, we need to see the data, but also because, there are lots of different nuances and details that need to be addressed, and time also is very important. But yeah, I smiled, and it's quite nice to smile when you see some results, or at least good news. Well, so definitely cautious optimism and smiling.
It's just nice, isn't it, both of you, to have light at the end of the tunnel. That's for the first time for months we've seen that, isn't it? Anyway, I saw you both nodding in agreement again. That's great. Elisabetta, I've got this one from Jeff Harrington in Reading. Is it possible to have the vaccine yet still be asymptomatic?
Right. So it is, generally speaking, it is very possible for a vaccine to only prevent a severe disease and not just preventing, for example, a mild disease. And actually, again, we see this with other vaccines, specifically for flu. So it's still worth taking the vaccine, but it's simply because you only get a mild disease. This is, again, when we really want to see the data from the pharmaceutical company Pfizer, because they haven't really given us the details about the symptoms and the severity of the symptoms of the people actually who got COVID during, or the symptoms during, when they either they were given the placebo or the virus. And so at the moment, we need to wait to see actually how well the vaccine can perform in real life, so that we can actually understand what it can do and what cannot do, because it might just be like for other viruses, that it prevents from severe symptoms, but not from infection. And that will be not ideal, but again, something that we might have to deal with.
Well, I want to pick up on that because Peter Tonks in Weston-super-Mare says, could the vaccine be used as a treatment as well as a preventative measure?
Right. I think it's very important to remember that vaccines work by training and preparing our immune system to recognize the virus. And this training, in the case of the Pfizer vaccine, actually takes likely 5 weeks. So 3 weeks for 2 doses, and then you have to wait 1 or 2 weeks afterwards. And so because it requires this weeks-long training, vaccines are much better actually at preventing instead of curing. And so they work much better as a preventative measure. It might be that there are some situations where actually vaccine can be used more for a treatment, but again, it seems unlikely for this case.
Barrett, I've got this question from Stephen Evan. What percentage of the vaccine needs to be given to the population for it to be effective in regards to a cure? Because some in the country don't want or believe in a vaccine. Now, are we talking about herd immunity here?
Yes, we're talking about the concept of the herd immunity. So what we want is, for example, with measles, we want 95% coverage because measles is highly infectious. In this case, in the coronavirus pandemic, what we want to aim for is make it difficult for the virus to find people that it can infect. So anything above 50, 60, 70% coverage, i.e. immunity, will be a very good result. And remember, to get between 60 and 70% of the world population immunized is a very tall order. So what we want is between 60 and 70%, and we will be in a better position to control it, because the majority of the world population will be then temporarily or momentarily immune.
And that raises other questions like this one from David Nowlin, and he's messaging us from Alabama in the United States. Says, since Pfizer can only produce 1.3 billion doses when 2 are needed, will other companies produce the vaccine as well?
Yes, so this is very good news in that we've got 11 candidate vaccines in the phase 3 trials right now. And my issues are, even with the Pfizer vaccine that we're all very excited about, it has got problems with storage. It needs minus 80 degrees centigrade. So in rich, affluent Western countries, we will probably end up using the Pfizer or the Oxford vaccine. And in other parts of the world, I expect us to use the India, China, Japan vaccines as well. So what is going to happen is vaccine A in one place, B, C, D, E, and all those vaccines together will provide enough to cover globally rather than just one vaccine.
And Gillian Roberts asks, should people be tested before being given the vaccine?
No, this isn't part of any protocol for testing before giving. So as long as you are otherwise not having a intercurrent infection at the same time, you wouldn't test otherwise.
Dr Groppelli, as a virologist, what are the questions that you, if you had Pfizer on the other end of the phone, what are the top 3 questions you would want answered before you would be happy to give someone this vaccine?
Right. I think the most important data will be about, the the details about the severity of disease and also the age of the people of the volunteers who received the vaccines. And so having the details about, so we can understand exactly how well these vaccines work and where it's more effective and where it's more, because the reality is that we really need a vaccine that is going to work in the most vulnerable people. And normally this means, older age groups. And so the real question is, when Professor says about show me the data, my question would be, question would be, give me the data about the severity of symptoms and about age, and also a little bit more details again about the timings, because some of the volunteers that have only received the vaccines, less than 2 months ago, and so how strong is the data when it comes to the longevity, so how long that immunity lasts. So, but bottom line is that any data they have, very, very happy to see it, so we can, have the solid and make an informed decision, and which is obviously what the regulators will do.
Yeah, Dr. Pankania, in the House of Commons, the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, he described this as an adult virus. A lot of people will say, well, it's very difficult to get that herd immunity if you can't vaccinate children.
It isn't an adult virus. That's incorrect, because this is a pandemic strain. In other words, it will infect anyone in any place. What Matt Hancock may be referring to is that it causes severe disease in adults, and especially in the 60-plus age group, as well as people with underlying health conditions, which invariably is an affliction of people as they get older. What is required really is, as long as we can cover the vulnerable people first, as well as the frontline healthcare workers and all the other people like teachers in the front line of getting an infection, we will be doing very well. We're several months and maybe a year or so away from being able to start immunizing on a mass scale in any way.
A year? Dr. Pankania, you think it's a year? Well, a lot of people are saying that this could happen by the spring.
Well, we will start off with immunizing the vulnerable groups, but for ordinary members of the public, it's going to take time. Supplies and getting all those things in gear is not going to be that easy.
Elisabetta, finally, and scientists, virologists are not given to overt excitement, I know, but should we be feeling happier today than we were 2 days ago about where this is headed?
I think so, absolutely. As I said, I smiled, and it's very nice to smile to good news or data, because the reality is that science, it takes a lot of time. Science is difficult. Science requires, troubleshooting and sort of, keeping yourself going even when it doesn't look good. So when something happens and it seems to be good, it's really nice to take it on board, not overestimate it, but also not underestimate it. And I think we all agree that also a pharmaceutical company like Pfizer would have not shared this really good news unless they are sure that they're going to have the solid data ready to be shared very, very quickly and very, very promptly. So yes, it's definitely good news. As I said, it's not, we have to be realistic, and we have to put things into context, into a time context. But yes, a smile and be a little bit happier. There is science is delivering. Give it time, give it the effort. Science is delivering.
Yeah, and God knows it's nice to be able to smile again, isn't it? Both of you, Dr. Elisabetta Groppelli and Dr. Bharat Pankania. Thank you both very much. Good to see you again. Thanks.
Thank you.